The steam still lingered in the washroom, and Claire's breathing grew heavy as Daniel pressed her against the cool tiles. His lips trailed from her neck to her collarbone, leaving a path of heated kisses. She tangled her fingers in his hair, pulling him closer as their bodies melded together. "You make me feel alive," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion and desire. Daniel cupped her face, his eyes searching hers before leaning in to capture her lips in a deep, lingering kiss. Their breaths mingled, and Claire felt her resolve melting completely. The weight of their secret only seemed to fuel the intensity between them. As their embrace deepened, Daniel pulled her into his arms, lifting her slightly as if she weighed nothing. His strong hands held her securely, and she wrapped her arms around his neck, their lips never parting. The sound of the shower became a distant hum as they lost themselves in each other. "Claire," Daniel murmured against her lips, his voice thick with longing. "I can't get enough of you." Her heart raced at his words, and she tightened her hold on him. "Then don't stop," she breathed, pulling him back for another passionate kiss. Time seemed to blur as they indulged in each other's touch, their forbidden love igniting a fire they couldn't extinguish. The thrill of secrecy heightened every moment, and for a brief time, the world outside ceased to exist. But the sharp knock at the door shattered their bubble. Claire froze in Daniel's arms, her eyes wide with panic. "Mom, I know you're in there." Emily's voice called out again, louder this time. Claire's blood ran cold, and she pulled away from Daniel, her chest heaving. "This can't be happening," she whispered, scrambling to adjust her robe. Daniel hesitated before moving toward the door, his expression tense. "Maybe she'll leave if we don't answer." "No," Claire said firmly, her hands trembling as she reached for the doorknob. "I have to face her." When she opened the door, Emily stood there, her arms crossed and an expression of disbelief etched across her face. "I followed you," Emily said, her voice trembling with anger. "I had a feeling something was going on, but I didn't want to believe it." "Emily, please, let me explain," Claire began, her voice pleading. "Explain what, Mom?" Emily snapped, her gaze flicking to Daniel, who stood shirtless behind her. "You're in a hotel with our neighbor. What kind of explanation could possibly make this okay?" Claire stepped forward, her heart aching at the tears brimming in Emily's eyes. "Emily, I never wanted you to find out like this. I'm so sorry." "Sorry?" Emily laughed bitterly. "You're sorry you got caught, that's all. Do you even care what this is doing to Dad, to me?" Claire reached for her daughter, but Emily pulled back, her expression hardening. "Don't," she said sharply. "You don't get to act like the victim here." "Emily," Daniel interjected, stepping forward. "This isn't just on your mom. I'm just as responsible." "Don't you dare," Emily snapped, her voice cutting through the air. "You're nothing but a homewrecker." The room fell silent, the weight of Emily's words hanging heavily between them. Claire felt the walls closing in, the consequences of her actions hitting her like a tidal wave. But then, to Claire's shock, Emily's expression softened slightly. She glanced at her mother, a strange mixture of anger and curiosity in her eyes. "You really feel something for him, don't you?" Claire hesitated, her heart pounding. I do," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Emily crossed her arms, her lips curling into a mocking smile. "Well, if that's the case, maybe I should join you, since you're so open to sharing your life with him." Claire's eyes widened in disbelief. "Emily, what are you talking about?" Emily stepped inside the room, closing the door behind her. She looked at Daniel, her expression unreadable. "You've already betrayed Dad, why stop now? Let's see just how far you're willing to go." "Emily, stop this," Claire pleaded, her voice breaking. But Emily moved closer to Daniel, her gaze daring him to react. "You're not scared, are you? You wanted her, didn't you? So why not me too?" "Emily," Claire's voice rose, panic evident. She grabbed her daughter's arm, pulling her back. "This isn't a game." Emily shrugged, her eyes cold. "It's no different from what you've been doing. Mom, you've already destroyed this family. Why not let me have a little fun too?" The tension in the room was suffocating, and Claire's heart shattered as she realized the depth of her daughter's pain and anger. She turned to Daniel, her voice trembling. "You need to leave. Now." Daniel nodded silently, grabbing his shirt and heading for the door. As he opened it, he looked back at Claire, his eyes filled with regret. "I'm sorry," he said softly before disappearing into the hallway. Claire turned to Emily, tears streaming down her face. "I know I've hurt you. I know I've made mistakes. But please, don't let my actions destroy you too." Emily stared at her mother for a long moment before finally speaking. "You already destroyed everything. Mom, I'm just trying to figure out what's left." With that, she walked out, leaving Claire alone in the hotel room, her heart heavy with guilt and the realization of what she had lost. Claire stood frozen in the center of the room, her mind racing as Emily stormed out. The door slammed shut, leaving only the echo of her daughter's sharp words behind. A wave of regret washed over her, but before she could fully process it, the sound of footsteps outside the door caught her attention. The door creaked open again. To her surprise, it wasn't Emily who returned, but Daniel. His expression was unreadable as he stepped back inside, closing the door behind him. "She's upset," he said quietly, running a hand through his hair. "But she didn't leave the building. I saw her in the hallway." Claire's heart sank further. "I've ruined everything," she whispered. "I've lost my daughter." Daniel hesitated before moving closer to her, his hand brushing against her arm. "Maybe I should talk to her, help her understand." Claire frowned, unsure if that was a good idea, but she nodded reluctantly. "If you think it will help." Daniel gave her a reassuring nod before stepping back out of the room. Claire sank onto the bed, her mind spiraling with what-ifs and regrets. In the hallway, Daniel found Emily leaning against the wall, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She glared at him as he approached. "What do you want?" she snapped. "I just want to talk," Daniel said, his voice calm. "This is a lot to process, I know." Emily scoffed, her anger still simmering. "You don't get to play the understanding guy. You're the one who's been sneaking around with my mom." Daniel sighed, stepping closer. "You're right. I won't make excuses for what I've done. But your mom, she's struggling, Emily. She's been lonely for a long time." Emily's expression faltered for a moment before hardening again. "So that makes it okay for you to take advantage of her?" "It's not about taking advantage," Daniel said gently. "We both made choices, and we both have to live with them. But that doesn't mean we can't try to fix things." Emily looked away, her jaw clenched. "You think this can be fixed?" "I think it's worth trying," Daniel said, stepping even closer. His tone softened. "You don't have to hate me, Emily, or your mom. This doesn't have to destroy you." Emily turned to face him, her anger mingling with confusion. "And what do you want from me? Forgiveness? Acceptance?" Daniel held her gaze, his voice steady. "I want to help, whatever that looks like." There was a long silence between them, the tension thick and palpable. Emily's eyes searched his, and for the first time, her defenses seemed to lower just slightly. She took a shaky breath, stepping closer to him. "I don't know how to forgive either of you," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I hate feeling like this." Daniel hesitated, then reached out, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. "You don't have to figure it all out right now. Just let yourself feel whatever you're feeling. That's a start." Emily stared at him for a long moment, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. And then, to both their surprise, she moved closer, leaning into him. Daniel froze, unsure of what to do, but Emily didn't pull away. "You don't have to pity me," she murmured, her voice soft and wavering. "I'm not a little girl." "I know you're not," Daniel said quietly, his hand resting on her shoulder. Emily tilted her head up to look at him, her face just inches from his. Her gaze lingered on his lips, and for a fleeting moment, the tension between them shifted into something else, something unexpected and dangerous. "Emily," Daniel began, his voice uncertain. But before he could finish, Emily closed the distance, her lips brushing against his. The kiss was brief, tentative, and filled with confusion, but it left them both breathless. Daniel stepped back quickly, his face a mixture of shock and guilt. "This isn't right," he said firmly, his voice shaking. Emily's cheeks flushed, a mix of embarrassment and defiance. "Why not? You didn't think about what was right when you were with my mom." "Emily, this is different," Daniel said, his tone pleading. "You're hurting. This isn't the way to deal with it. Emily's eyes filled with tears, and she turned away, wrapping her arms around herself. You don't understand, she whispered. I've always felt invisible, like no one really sees me. Not even my mom. Daniel stepped closer, his voice soft. You're not invisible, Emily. You're smart and strong, and so much more than you realize. But this, it can't happen. Emily wiped at her eyes, her shoulders trembling. Why not? You obviously don't care about boundaries. Daniel's expression darkened, and he gently turned her to face him. Because I do care. About you, and your mom, and how much damage this could cause. You deserve better than this, Emily. Better than me. Emily looked up at him, her resolve faltering. For a moment, it seemed like she might argue. But then she simply nodded, stepping back. Maybe you're right, she said quietly. Daniel watched her for a moment before sighing deeply. Go back to your mom. Talk to her. You both need to figure this out together. Without another word, Emily turned and walked down the hallway, leaving Daniel alone to grapple with the storm he had helped create.